Poor Jimmy. True, it was a terrible night for women, children, and for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who cut his lawn.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go, for healthcare, for our climate, for science, for journalism, for justice, for free speech. It was a terrible night for poor people, for the middle class, for seniors who rely on Social Security, for our allies in Ukraine.
Jimmy Kimmel's a loser. I do Jimmy Kimmel. I did him a lot.
Yeah.
And he'd be standing on the sidewalk. Oh, sir, may I bring you in? He'd bring me in every time. The whole show is talking bad about Trump.
He called us doofuses when we had you on.
He's a group of doofuses in flat-brimmed hats.
Guess what? We
Ask
did
him how
5x
many.
what he did.
Ask him. Yeah, you do bigger. Yeah, you do. His show's dying.
Jimmy Kimmel's sanctimonious monologues and faux virtuous tirades have long danced unchecked in the echo chambers of late-night television. But Donald Trump's $500 million lawsuit just shattered the illusion of consequence-free commentary. With surgical precision, Greg Gutfeld transforms Kimmel's self-inflicted legal nightmare into a comedic masterclass, peeling apart the layers of smug arrogance that once shielded Hollywood's favorite political heckler. This isn't just entertainment. It's a cultural reckoning where late-night elitism collides with populist retribution. Kimmel's once untouchable persona is now exposed, vulnerable, and hilariously dismantled by Gutfeld's relentless satire. The sidewalk Kimmel once ushered Trump from now feels eerily symbolic, a metaphor for the collapse of his own relevance. The roast isn't coming, it's already here, and Kimmel's ego is the main course.
It's incredibly brave to take this stance after you've made $300, $400 million not being woke, right? Loving Donald Trump, exploiting the mentally ill, wearing blackface. Look at the crop of woke comics, whether it's Stern or Jimmy Kimmel, his BFF, Sarah Silverman, Joy Behar, Michael Ian Black. What do they all have in common? They wore blackface. And then...
Remember the Academy Awards? I said how he's the worst host in the history of the Academy Awards. And this stupid guy goes up, and just before the Best Picture of the Year, the show is almost over. They're waiting for the Best Picture of the Year. He gets up, and he says, and his wife said, please don't do it. Please, darling, don't go out. His manager said, don't do it. I have to do it. He goes out and reads my truth to the entire audience right before the prime time, the Best Picture. And it said, basically, he is the worst host of the history. He reads the whole thing. And then I think he said something like, ha, 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 he thinks he bothers me, or some crap like that. I said, he's one of the dumbest human beings ever. He should have listened to his wife. What a dope.
The pantheon of self-righteous late-night comedians, once insulated by their media sycophants, is crumbling under the sheer weight of its own hypocrisy. And Jimmy Kimmel stands front and center in this spectacular collapse. After amassing hundreds of millions pandering to anti-woke audiences, Kimmel's revisionist pivot into progressive sainthood reeks of opportunistic amnesia. From blackface escapades to mocking the mentally ill, his comedic resume is a minefield of offenses the woke mob pretends never happened. Greg Gutfeld, with his unflinching satirical scalpel, exposes Kimmel's desperate virtue signaling for what it truly is, a hollow, performative charade designed to curry favor with the very audience he once ridiculed. The Oscars debacle, where Kimmel audaciously read Trump's critique to an audience gasping for relevance, wasn't defiance. It was a masterclass in self-sabotage. In an industry that thrives on selective outrage, Gutfeld ensures Kimmel's contradictions aren't just.
And it was a terrible night for everyone who voted against him. And guess what? It was a bad night for everyone who voted for him, too. You just don't realize it yet.
Oh. You know what? If I ever cry on TV, it'll be because Maroon 5 put out a new song.
In the grand theater of late-night sanctimony, Jimmy Kimmel's monologues have devolved into a symphony of performative despair, a melodramatic spectacle where every political outcome is a catastrophe and every disagreement a moral failing, His apocalyptic lament that both Trump voters and opponents are destined for inevitable doom encapsulates the narcissism of Hollywood's echo chamber. But Greg Gutfeld sees through the crocodile tears and self-congratulatory doomsaying, reframing Kimmel's televised breakdown as comedic gold rather than civic prophecy. The faux sincerity, punctuated by shallow pop culture quips about Maroon 5, reveals a host more concerned with virtue posturing than intellectual coherence. In a media landscape where emotional theatrics are masquerading as insight, Gutfeld's satire becomes the necessary antidote, turning Kimmel's televised sob story into a case study of late-night irrelevance.
I just got a review, and has there ever been a worse host than Jimmy Kimmel at the Oscars? His opening was that of a less-than-average person trying too hard to be something which he is not and never can be. Get rid of Kimmel and perhaps replace him with another washed-up but cheap ABC talent, George Slopanopoulos.
Jimmy Kimmel's latest Oscars performance wasn't just a misstep. It was a masterclass in mediocrity, masquerading as relevance. With all the charm of a substitute teacher reading off a script he doesn't understand, Kimmel's desperate attempt to revive his dwindling late-night persona fell flat, painfully exposing the chasm between Hollywood's self-image and audience reality. Donald Trump's scathing assessment didn't simply critique Kimmel's hosting. It obliterated the manufactured aura of significance that the Oscars and its chosen mouthpieces still cling to. Greg Gutfeld sharpens the irony further, highlighting how the solution proposed, swapping Kimmel for yet another recycled ABC relic like George Stephanopoulos, reveals the depth of Hollywood's creative bankruptcy. It's not just about bad hosts. It's about an industry caught in a loop of its own irrelevant elitism. The awards might still be golden, but the credibility? Completely tarnished.
The killer phrase was at the end when Kimmel said, "You just don't realize it." Because you see, he's smarter than you, and he needs you to know that. And his ego can't bear that there's someone out there more famous and more influential than him. I got news for you, Kimmel. The last time you mattered, Bruce Jenner still had a penis.
When Jimmy Kimmel smugly declares, "You just don't realize it," he isn't informing, he's projecting. It's the quintessential anthem of a late-night elitist whose fragile ego demands constant affirmation of intellectual superiority. But Greg Gutfeld, wielding satire like a scalpel, doesn't allow such condescension to go unchecked. The bitter irony is palpable. Kimmel's desperate attempts to assert relevance are overshadowed by figures who command cultural influence without even trying, none more so than Donald Trump. The brutal quip about Bruce Jenner encapsulates a truth Kimmel's entourage dares not whisper. His cultural shelf life expired long before his moral lectures became fashionable. In the grand theater of fame, Kimmel is no longer a headliner. He's background noise in a room that stopped listening. Gutfeld's takedown isn't just comedic, it's a public service announcement.
Jimmy's career peaked with busty girls on trampolines. Now the only boob we see is him. He once co-hosted The Man Show. Now he's sobbing like he just watched Steel Magnolias 3 days into his menstrual cycle. Here's another morose multimillionaire.
Hey there.
Kimmel's career trajectory is the quintessential Hollywood tragedy. From gleefully exploiting juvenile antics on The Man Show to delivering weepy monologues masquerading as moral epiphanies. Once the ringleader of trampolines and testosterone-fueled irreverence, Kimmel has now rebranded himself as the accidental high priest of late-night sanctimony, weeping over political losses with the melodrama of a bad soap opera. Greg Gutfeld, never one to let hypocrisy slip by unnoticed, skewers this transformation with surgical wit, exposing how Kimmel's desperate need for cultural relevance has turned him into a parody of his former self. The irony is rich. The man who once profited from frat house humor now lectures America through tear-streaked diatribes, blind to the fact that the only remaining spectacle is his own imploding credibility. In a sea of multimillionaire lamentations, Kimmel's act has gone from provocative to pathetically predictable.
I wonder who he thinks the people at fault are.
The people at fault are Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Jill Biden, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, every elected member of Congress. The Democratic Party let that disaster happen. That is not a media failure. That is a Democratic Party failure. And only right-wing manufactured outrage who claims the media and the Democratic Party work as one have fused it into this.
Oh, I have a few names to add. CNN, MSNBC, CBS, the town crier.
In a political climate riddled with deflection and spin, the Democratic Party's latest disaster has forced even its most loyal apologists to confront an inconvenient truth. This isn't a media narrative failure, it's a leadership implosion. Greg Gutfeld dismantles the predictable blame shifting with his trademark precision, calling out a roster of names who have treated accountability as optional. Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Jill and Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. Each one complicit in a systemic collapse masked by performative outrage. The media's role, from CNN's manufactured indignation to MSNBC's polished gaslighting, is no longer about informing the public but laundering political failures into cultural crusades. Yet the facade is cracking. As Gutfeld underscores, the symbiotic alliance between media elites and Democratic power brokers isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a painfully visible reality. The only thing more transparent than their cover-ups is the arrogance with which they're
wrecks because they believe the media. And yet we're fine because we weren't brainwashed. We know the media's job is to lie, to create anxiety out of proportion to the actual threat or no threat at all. Journalists really only need to give you one tip to manage stress, and that's stop paying attention to journalists.
As mainstream media drowns in a self-induced hysteria loop, those still tethered to reality watch with bemused detachment. Greg Gutfeld surgically exposes this spectacle, revealing how the so-called arbiters of truth have pivoted from informing the public to engineering perpetual panic. The cycle is predictable. Amplify fear, distort proportion, and profit off the chaos they manufacture. Yet the antidote is disarmingly simple. Stop consuming the product. The irony is brutal. Journalists who preach mental wellness while fueling nationwide anxiety have become the architects of a stress epidemic they pretend to cure. Gutfeld's commentary isn't just satire. It's a cultural exorcism pulling back the curtain on an industry that thrives not on facts, but on fear-mongering dressed as civic duty. For every citizen liberated from their narrative, another brick falls from the collapsing cathedral of mainstream media credibility.
How did you feel watching Kimmel cry?
One of his tears fell out. Hold on. It's funny how this derangement's working, because it only seems to work if you have a camera in front of you.
The spectacle of Jimmy Kimmel's televised teardrops isn't a display of raw emotion. It's a choreographed act designed for maximum performative mileage. Greg Gutfeld masterfully punctures this facade, highlighting the curious phenomenon where moral anguish seems to conveniently manifest only when a camera lens is present. It's a peculiar strain of derangement, one that thrives on audience validation and media amplification, yet dissipates the moment the spotlight fades. Kimmel's televised sobbing isn't vulnerability, it's content creation, a calculated exchange where tears are bartered for applause in the virtue economy. Gutfeld's satire turns this emotional theater into a mirror, reflecting the absurdity of a media culture where sincerity has been outsourced to production crews. In a world where suffering is monetized and outrage is staged. Kimmel's teardrop becomes less a symbol of compassion and more a punchline in a collapsing credibility act.
Presidency is ripe for mockery and ridicule and even gentle humor if you like him. I mean, just Hunter Biden alone, just in the recent stuff. I mean, you could go on forever. But Kimmel has abdicated his role of a comedian. He's now just a political hack. Which I'm grateful for, because then I get the turf to myself. I'm not a comedian, but I just filled the gap. That's why I'm beating him every night, because he sat there with that guy and basically he spoon-fed him like he was a dementia patient at a restaurant.
The American presidency has always been fertile ground for satire, yet Jimmy Kimmel's transformation from comedian to partisan mouthpiece has left an entire genre abandoned in his wake. Greg Gutfeld, unencumbered by the ideological blinders that now afflict Kimmel's monologues, seizes the opportunity to reclaim the comedic battlefield, not as a jester, but as an unfiltered truth-teller. The Hunter Biden scandals alone could sustain years of late-night content, yet Kimmel chooses instead to play caretaker, spoon-feeding sanitized interviews to an administration teetering on cognitive collapse. Gutfeld's ratings dominance isn't a fluke. It's a direct consequence of Kimmel's abdication. By sacrificing comedy for activism, Kimmel has vacated the very turf that made him relevant, allowing Gutfeld to not just fill the gap, but to own it. In a landscape starving for authentic satire, Gutfeld's unapologetic mockery becomes both entertainment and cultural correction.
Last night was the 96th Academy Awards show, and while you might have missed it, there was one clear winner. No, not Oppenheimer. It was sanctimonious leftists for their lead role in pretending they are better than you. Winner number one, Jimmy Kimmel. For the fourth time, Kimmel hosted the Oscars before an adoring crowd of Hollywood stars who laughed and curried favor with the man who wore blackface so many times.
The 96th Academy Awards was less a celebration of cinematic brilliance and more a meticulously choreographed pageant of sanctimony, where Hollywood's self-anointed moral arbiters gathered to reaffirm their imagined superiority. While Oppenheimer may have claimed the statue, the real winners of the night were the sanctimonious leftists, basking in the hollow glow of performative virtue. At the epicenter of this farce stood Jimmy, donning the mantle of host for the fourth time, a man whose blackface escapades are conveniently forgotten by an industry that weaponizes outrage with surgical selectivity. Gutfeld, ever the cultural insurgent, frames this spectacle not as an awards show, but as an annual ritual where Hollywood's elite congratulate themselves for values they violate in private. In an arena where hypocrisy is cheered louder than talent, Kimmel's presence is no longer comedic. It's emblematic of an industry so lost in its own delusions, it can't hear its audience walking away.
I don't want to suggest that Kimmel's show has become boring and predictable, but last night during the taping, people in the studio audience were changing the channel. And that's your 7 jokes.
Jimmy Kimmel's late-night show has reached a level of predictability so profound, even his studio audience feels compelled to mentally, if not physically, change the channel mid-taping. Greg Gutfeld, with his unrelenting satirical edge, captures this comedic freefall where Kimmel's monologues, once sharp and irreverent, now drone with the energy of a hostage reading cue cards. The very act of attending a live taping has morphed into a test of endurance, as recycled punchlines and hollow political jabs blur into a monotonous echo chamber. Gutfeld's commentary doesn't just mock the content, it dismantles the entire premise of a show, clinging to relevance through muscle memory alone. In a media landscape where attention is currency, Kimmel's dwindling cash is on full display, a nightly ritual of forced laughter that serves as a case study in self-inflicted obsolescence.